Everybody, it's 521, week number 3. Welcome. This week we're talking a lot about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. There's a lot of resources and articles for you. There's not an assignment this week. Coming up at the end of week 5, you have a 3-day instructional lesson plan. So that's coming up. Take a look at that. Maybe get started on that one. You have a discussion board, and this one starts to kind of hopefully reframe and retrain how you look at space in your classrooms and in really all learning spaces, as looking at the physical space and how your current classroom without any changes would be able to accommodate and include a student with a physical difference. And so I think a lot of our minds, when we hear about physical disabilities, accommodations, we jump right to wheelchair, but also just a variety of physical needs. And part of this discussion board, hopefully, is that we look to make our classrooms more inclusive for all students, so that they feel, I mean, obviously included. It's what like inclusivity is, but more importantly, that they feel like they belong. They feel like they are seen, and if those things happen, we know from a number of pieces of research that if they feel those things, they tend to learn better from those teachers. And so we're looking at just one specific way, looking at space and how space impacts a student's, at its most basic level, ability to be in the space, and at its most kind of richest way, how they feel like they do or do not belong. Like, it's a big one, and it's really, really important. And it's the kind of thing that we often don't talk about in schools unless we have to. But I think the more we can set up learning spaces to include all our students and to make them feel like they are included in all the things we're doing, the better off we're going to be. So you have a handful of readings. You're continuing with the Dell, chapters 4 and 10. There's a bunch of different assistive tools, resources, and then the big thing, the big reading you're going to be doing this week is looking at various UDL guidelines, tools, resources. The one I really like is UDL. I'm just looking at my computer, udlguidelines.cast.org. That's the link for read the UDL guidelines. And so you get you get kind of 3 buckets. And the idea of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, these guidelines is learner agency, which for me is so, so powerful because it shifts the center of gravity away from the teacher and to the students. At its most basic, the one doing the talking is the one doing the learning. And it's not lost on me that you are silently watching this video while I'm doing the talking. I get that. Let me actually do a quick aside with that. There's a lot of downside for not having a discussion and for not having you do a lot of the talking. And there's a lot of ways to address that. But the big, big upside of what this is, where I'm talking and you are not talking, is that you get this video anytime, any place, and any pace. I'm going to say that one more time. And we actually developed these. I was on the state superintendent of California's EdTech task force a number of years ago. They came out with a plan for kind of reimagining what education would look like with technology. And one of the big things we came up with were those 3 things: that learning can happen anytime, any place, and any pace. So anytime is like, you can watch this video whenever. You're teaching, you have a prep period after school. Maybe it's in the morning while you're making your coffee, you have a few minutes before you have to get to work or before the kids get up, or it's after the kids go to sleep. Like, you can watch this video whenever you want. And there's something to be said for that. This class is not Wednesdays from 5 to 10 p.m., which is what it used to be when I first started teaching at Concordia. We used to meet in person, and it was like, you would hear me talk Wednesday from 5 to 7. Not nonstop. That would be awful. The any place means you can watch it at home, coffee shop, classroom, like whatever. Like, obviously, yes. But that's also like, it's a fairly profound thing to think of with like a first grader, that they can learn any place if we have the tech tools and that access for them. And the final one that I think is most overlooked is any pace. And for me, this means speed up or slow down the video, right? If you're like, all right, whatever, he talks too slow for me, on YouTube, you can listen to this at 1.2 speed. But what I think is more powerful is if there's a new concept, and for either you as the graduate student or for your students and you as teacher, they can rewind the thing like 10 times in a row. You say a thing and you're like, what? If we were doing this live on Wednesday at 5 p.m., you might raise your hand once and be like, wait, say that one more time? I would say it again, and like one person might be, anytime, any place, any pace. Like, what? Or like, what was the thing like a couple weeks ago about any pace? You might raise your hand again and be like, what did you say about was it like the superintendent ed test, the task, what was that? And I might say it again, like, cool, done. But you're like, oh, it was like the week 3 video. You can rewatch that whole bit like 20 times. If it's the bigger concept, you wouldn't, but you could. Like, what was the thing? What was that? What was that? It's it's there as many times as you want. Um, Depending on when you watch this, I'll talk about it in the future because for me it is in the future. I'm meeting with some 7th graders to talk about editing audio, which works out well. My undergrad's actually in music, and I interned at a recording studio for a couple years right out of college, and so I know a lot about editing audio. And so they're like, we don't really care how you do it. If you want to just like send us some resources, if you want to do it in person, and like everybody click on this at the same time. And I actually pushed pretty hard for a recorded video. I'll still be there and be like, all right, we're going to learn about editing audio. Here's the link, go. And then you just go, like leave the classroom, find a quiet spot, listen to the video, pause it, practice it. And I've done versions of this in the past. And the biggest thing about editing audio in GarageBand on an iPad is that much of it is really straightforward. And once you learn it once, you're like, cool, got it. But there's a couple key moments where it's like, how did you do the thing? How did you cut it? Or how do you duplicate the track? And so by doing that as a video and not live in person, students are able to rewind it. And I've actually not so much snuck up, but just like kind of doing laps outside of the classroom. Kids like kind of leaning up against like a basketball hoop pole, and the kids against the side of the classroom, one just kind of standing and walking. And there's one student kind of leaning up against the side of the classroom. They're like, watch the thing, rewound it, watched it, rewound it, watched it, rewound it, watched it, rewound it again and again and again. And then finally they got it. And for me, that's the power of video. And to a much larger extent, it's an example of UDL, the Universal Design for Learning, is that it puts the agency on the learner. They get to choose the pace. They can rewind it as many times as they need to. And in a month, if they're like, oh, we did a video, Mr. Selleck emailed us a link to it. Sure enough, they can just search their mail, find the video, rewatch it, and they're all set. So let's talk a bit more about UDL. So the 3 kind of buckets of it are designing multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. And so you're going to read through this. I don't need to stand up here, sit here and lecture about UDL and explain the thing. You can just as easily read on your own. But for me, the lens is twofold. It's that learner agency, and it's thinking about all learners. So it's not just designing for kind of the middle, where it's going to be too easy for some, too hard for others, and just right for some. But it's really looking at how do we actually get everybody involved with it. And I think the bias of learner agency in the UDL model is really, really powerful, and continues to be a way that you can get students more excited, more engaged, and more included in lesson plans. There are some lesson plans that fit really well for this. Others initially are going to feel more like a struggle, but it tends to be guidelines more than like a specific lesson plan of how you can think about designing learning experiences for students. If you've used this before, hopefully a few new resources will give some nuance. If this is new to you, you're in for a treat. It's powerful, it's simple, it's an inclusive way that makes students feel seen and hopefully, if you do it well, gets them even more excited about lessons you're doing. It's good stuff. I think you're going to really like it. So, with that, take a look at all the things in week 3. If you have questions, reach out. Otherwise, happy week 3, everybody.